People sometimes wonder, if I'm a Christian, am I supposed to obey the law? And the answer is yes. But it's the why that really matters. It's the why that can make you sin. Greatest teacher who ever lived said, your problems, your difficulties are not insurmountable. What is insurmountable is God. It is kingdom, his action and presence among us. And so you can make today a golden rule day. And in fact, that kind of brings us to what we're going to talk about today, because as you may know, when Jesus talks about the golden rule, we'll look at it later on, but he says, in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets. We're going to talk about the law and the prophets and goodness in our hearts. This is the particular passage we're looking at today. Jesus says in Matthew 5, verse 17, do not think I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. Now, why would he say that? Well, it's because there were people who thought that he had come to abolish the law and the prophets. For one thing, he spoke with unique authority. This passage is the first time in the Sermon on the Mount that he will use the phrase, truly I tell you. Rabbis didn't talk like that. They quoted the Torah, they quoted other rabbis. This rabbi was uniquely authoritative. And then he had kind of an odd relationship with the law. And he would let his disciples pick grain to eat on the Sabbath, and he would heal on the Sabbath, and he would eat with tax collectors and sinners, and he would touch lepers, and those were all things they thought you weren't supposed to do. So there were folks that thought, well, he must have come to abolish the law and the prophets. So he says, let me be real clear on this, not only have I not come to abolish them, I have come to fulfill them. Now, what does it mean that he came to fulfill the law and the prophets? The law and the prophets was a way of referring to all of the Old Testament. They would sometimes talk about Torah as the books of Moses, the first 5 books, and then all the rest as written prophetically, the law and the prophets. Sometimes people see that I've come to fulfill, and they think, well, what that means is that Jesus obeyed the law perfectly, so I don't have to. I don't have to worry about it. As long as I believe the right thing about what he did for me, I got a free ticket to heaven. That is not what he means by this. By fulfilling the law, for one thing, he shows us in his life what a life that keeps the law perfectly actually looks like, so that we can see it and actually desire it. And then he gives us the power to live in the kingdom now with him and now with his Spirit, to actually be able to move towards living that kind of life ourselves. And it's also the fulfillment in the sense that everything in the law and the prophets from the beginning was pointing towards something. And that's something that it was pointing towards, because it's a story. It was him and his story. Kind of like if you've seen the old original Star Wars movie and then you saw the second installment and then the third one, and you realize Darth Vader, the enemy, is actually Luke's father and Leia's father, and the reconciliation is possible. So then there's guidance and instruction. Don't give it to the dark side of the force. Don't be a force for hatred, etc. So he's the fulfillment in that sense. It turns out that everything was pointing to him in a way that nobody could have really quite predicted. But once it happens, it's just quite inevitable. So now when we think about the law, we want to think about one of God's greatest gifts to humanity. Truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law, until everything is accomplished, until all of humanity, God's cosmic project of community, we all look the way that God wants us to. And the essence of the law, of course, is do to other people what you would have them do to you. That is love. Love God, love your neighbor. Often Christians think that when Jesus came, it was to replace the law with grace. So I want you to listen to these words. This is from Psalm 19. The psalmist writes, the law of the Lord is perfect, refreshing the soul. The statutes of the Lord are trustworthy, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, giving joy to the heart. The commands of the Lord are radiant, giving light to the eyes. The decrees of the Lord are firm, and all of them are righteous altogether. I came down to do this by the ocean because it refreshes my soul. I'm looking at a couple of people on surfboards out there right now. And the psalmist says, rightly understood, the law is like that. Now, if that's the law, do you think when we get to the New Testament, what God says is, well, actually, I might have been wrong about the law. kind of doesn't work. I was just having a bad millennium. So forget all that stuff about the law. It's helpful here to distinguish between two different ideas. One is the law as God gave it, or what Israel called the law and the prophets. That's the story of who God is, what God's character is like, and what God thinks a good person ought to look like. We have this perennial problem. How do I live? How should I act as a friend? What should I do with my money? How do I get to the end of my life and not have great regrets about having been selfish, corrupt in my character, or petty or small-minded? Thank God, these amazing words and stories have been given to us to answer that anguishing question, how should I live? So Moses says, what other nation is like Israel, God, to whom you have given your laws and your commandments? People loved it. Now, law in the other sense might be in quotation marks, the law, but that's really legalism. That's distorted law. That's law that we turn into a human system. Dallas Willard wrote one time that we turn the law from a pathway to grace into the wrong kind of law, which becomes an instrument for cultural superiority and human oppression. And then it just becomes this kind of odd book of rules that we will use to make ourselves feel better than other people, make us feel superior. So it actually becomes the anti-law. The essence of law is love God, love other people, and law helps us see in more concrete ways how do we do this. But legalism, law the wrong way, when Paul would talk about law as opposed to God's grace, that's law in quotation marks, as like a OSHA rule book. True story. One time, the first church I ever worked at, my receptionist buzzed me and said there was a man to see me from OSHA. And so I said, well, show him in. And he sat down and started talking to me. It's a true story about the decibel levels of rock concerts and jet airports. And I finally stopped him and I said, are we out of compliance somewhere? What's going on? Long story short, it turns out, at least back in those days, that if anybody contacted OSHA, they were required by law to go to the workplace and check it out. So what happened in this case was somebody from the church that I was working at called OSHA and said, the music at my church is too loud. And so I called the whole staff in and I said to the OSHA guy, I don't mean to make light of this, but it's not every day we have somebody coming out from OSHA. He said, you think you feel strange. You have any idea how much ridicule I've taken from OSHA people all week with them knowing I was going out to bust a church? Okay, so those kind of rules. How loud can the music be? What kind of instruments can you listen to? What kind of clothes can you wear? Legalism will change its form from one century to another, from one culture to another, but always it's an abuse, a misuse of the law that makes it both trivial and exhausting, and exists so that I can puff myself up and feel superior to other people. And of course, that was going on in Jesus' day, just as it does in ours. In our days, I think in many ways, in the American church right now, political ideology has replaced an old set of behavioral rules, don't chew tobacco, don't dance, don't drink, as the new legalism of our day. As long as you believe, but always we'll try to do that. We'll try to turn things into, we'll end up abusing the law. And then we don't love the law in the right way. So you might think about it like this. I went surfing with my son not too long ago, and he pointed out, Dad, when you're trying to catch a wave, you're always pushing that board down with your arms so hard. Now, if it's a big, powerful wave, that'll be okay. But if it's a smaller wave, then you don't want to put so much pressure on it so that your weight can be distributed and you can pop up more easily. And I did it, and he was right. See, the law of Johnny is perfect, refreshing the soul. The precepts of Johnny are right, making wise the simple. The law is that way. It is not, as Dallas used to say, it's not the source of goodness, that's God and God's grace, but it is forever the course of goodness. Grace and law go together. Law is a gift of grace to us, and then grace gives us the power to move towards it. And the heart of it, the essence of it, always is love. So today, love the law. Be deeply grateful that God has given us a picture, a story, words. We're not stumbling around in the dark. To be filled with love, to be clothed with compassion and kindness and humility and gentleness and patience. To think about that which is true and noble and right. To have compassion and serve others. To think more highly of others. What a great gift we have been given. So loving. And then in particular today, and Dallas would often say this, if you want to be a follower of Jesus and learn how to love the law rightly, just do the next right thing. When you're with another person, how can I serve him? How can I love him? How can I speak the truth right all? I was remembering this morning quite a recent incident where I was with somebody and they were deeply needy, and I looked in my wallet and I had a large bill, so I gave it to them. And then when I was remembering it, I remembered, actually, that was a dream. I didn't do that. So then to say, okay, I'll carry a bill in my wallet today and look for someone and seek to give in a generous way. Today, whatever it is, just do the next right thing. And then just like the waves keep coming, and after one wave is gone, another one comes, moments are that way. That's part of grace. So when the next moment comes, do the next right thing. Remember, Jesus came to fulfill the law. So the law and the prophets are summed up in this one statement, which we call the golden rule. Make it a golden rule day. Let your soul be refreshed.
If you like hearing John talk about the Sermon on the Mount, we've got a whole series on that. So go ahead and subscribe to make sure you don't miss any future episodes in that series. You can also go back and catch up on any episodes that you may have missed. Now, if you're interested in the email or the text alert that goes along with each episode, you can let us know at becomenew.com/subscribe, and we'll make sure that you get those. If you want to help us spread the word about Become New, the best way to do it is just to watch, like, and comment each video that we put out. So we would love to hear your thoughts. If you want to chime in the comments, that would help us, and we'd love to engage with you there. Lastly, if you've got a prayer request, there's a group of us who meet each weekday to pray for viewers just like yourself. You can send us your prayer request to the number 855-888-0444, and we would love to pray for you. We'll catch you next time.